the Insurance Institute, who gave me lots of really good career advice on how to do things, how not to do things. And I think that was probably what pushed me over the edge of being able to, or being honored with an honorary AIA. How you should probably be grateful for more things than what you have, because there's a lot of people out there struggling and some pretty hard consequences. For example, Ohio. You have a Cincinnati chapter, you have a Toledo chapter, you have a Cleveland chapter, you have a Columbus chapter, you have a Youngstown. I mean, so you have all these individual chapters, plus on top of that, a state chapter.
The AIA motto states that good design makes a difference. How do you personally measure and evaluate whether AIA Indiana's initiatives are truly making a difference in communities across the state? On this episode of the On Center podcast, we're joined by Jason Shelley, Honorary AIA and a pivotal figure in Indiana's architectural landscape. Since 2007, Jason has served as the Executive Director of AIA Indiana, where he has been instrumental in uniting architects, advocating for policies that enhance community health and sustainability, and promoting the value of thoughtful design across the state. With a political science degree from Indiana University, his career seamlessly blends public policy expertise with a deep commitment to the built environment. Beyond his professional endeavors, Jason is an avid IndyCar enthusiast, often found supporting his favorite team's trackside.
Mm-hmm.
And it is May here, so...
Yeah, I was there over the weekend.
It's your favorite month.
It is my favorite month by far. May is the greatest.
Very cool. Yeah, I was there with you on Friday. All right. Question 1. You've been Executive Director of AIA Indiana since January 2007. Mm-hmm. Following your role as State Director at the National Federation of Independent Business, what inspired your transition from general business advocacy to specifically championing architects and the built environment? And how did your previous experience prepare you for this specialized leadership role?
Yeah. Well, I say what drew me to, because I was happy working for National Federation of Independent Business. I was the Indiana State Director, NFIB, and had done that for 4 years, and that was a good job, and I enjoyed it. But I knew that what AIA strives for, promoting, protecting the profession of architecture, good design, historic preservation. I knew those issues. I had just a little bit more passion for those issues, and that
kind of stems from, I was born and raised in Madison, Indiana, historic downtown Madison. And when I was a kid growing up
downtown, a lot of the spaces, these beautiful old historic homes, were cut up into small apartments, and it was kind of ratty in many locations, but yet you could see this beautiful historic downtown. And over time, people started coming in and being able to buy these beautiful historic homes and fix them up and have a literal masterpiece that they could have. And so that, growing up in a community that kind of valued historic preservation, kind of led me down the path of wanting to, support and work for architects who are very focused on, again, good design and everything that goes with that good design, making sure spaces fit, spaces are healthy, spaces are safe, spaces are pleasing, more worker productivity, healthier patients, healthier building occupants. All those things just kind of click a lot of the boxes that I have a passion for. So for me, it was an easy switch. Even though I enjoyed my time at the NFIB, I've been with AIA now almost 18 and a half years, and it's been a great, great job. And like I tell everyone, including my kids, like, do something you really like, because it doesn't necessarily feel like working. You actually enjoy doing what you're doing, and I'm one of the lucky ones that gets to be able to do that.
How did your previous position prepare you for it?
Yeah, the previous position, my entire background has been in government affairs. And so I started as an intern in the Indiana House of Representatives. Shortly after that, I was hired on full-time as a legislative assistant, and then went out, and my first job out of working for the House of Representatives on staff doing constituent services and helping legislators during session was lobbying for the insurance industry. And so that was a unique position, and that really helped, kind of helped me learn how to be a good lobbyist. I was had a great mentor there at the Insurance Institute who gave me lots of really good career advice on how to do things, how not to do things. And from there, I said one, state director for NFIB, again, really heavy focus on government affairs. And so kind of that unique time of not only working on staff for about 5 years, but then lobbying for 2 different business organizations, different issues, but still kind of basic, straightforward lobbying at the state house level, definitely prepared me for lobbying for AIA. And some of the issues kind of cross over. Like for example, AIA Indiana is big on updating Indiana's outdated building codes. Well, building codes, things like that are very important to the insurance industry because of just mitigation. So that has helped prepare me for this, just those type of connections. NFIB, a lot of tax issues. There are tax issues with working for architects, whether it be a state historic preservation tax credit or, there's been efforts in the past to extend the sales tax to services, which would include architectural services, which immediately put us at a distinct disadvantage compared to our neighboring states who do not have a full sales tax on services.
But maybe licensed to work here.
Exactly.
Okay.
And so that type training, experiences, working on those type issues really kind of set the path for me to be successful working for AIA Indiana.
Very cool. Very cool. You hold the designation Honorary AIA, which is relatively uncommon for non-architects. Could you share the story behind receiving this honor and how it has shaped your perspective as someone who leads architects without being an architect by training?
Yeah. AIA National does not give out many of those honorary AIA awards. And I was blessed, pleased, fortunate, grateful that I have a couple members who really thought that I should be an honorary AIA member. And so they were going to try to surprise me. And that didn't work because there's a lot of submission materials that are needed to make the case to those at AIA National who select honorary AIA members. And there's not many. So they needed my help. So there's like, Jason, we didn't want to tell you this, but we need your help putting this together. So I'm like, okay, it was very nice of them to do that. It wasn't my idea. It was their idea. So I helped them put it together. And I think probably one of the main things, or the main thing that got me the recognition, was Indiana during the Pence administration was at risk of losing our energy building code and just completely vanishing, going away. And we at AIA sounded the alarms and got people mobilized and got people making the calls that needed to be made to the right people with the right letters, the other, kind of rallying all the allied troops, organizations, et cetera. And it came down, and this was all happening during December, like Christmas. And so it's hard to get people energized and focused during that holiday time. But we were able to do so. And we were able to save the Indiana's building code, or Indiana's energy building code, from extinction. And it was literally signed by then Governor Pence, the executive order that had it stay, the day before or the evening before it was going to expire. So we barely made it through there, but it took a massive group effort. And I think me leading that effort, not that I did it by myself, I did not definitely do it by myself. It took all those other people and all those different phone calls, letters, organizations, kind of all focused on one topic to help save that. And I think that was probably what pushed me over the edge of being able to, or being honored with an honorary AIA. And it is, for me, it's a very important honor. I'm very grateful to have that honor. Because I love what architects do. I mean, just making good spaces for people that are healthy and safe and productive, and oftentimes very pleasing and interesting. So it's a unique mix of like health, safety, welfare, and keeping people safe, but also beautification and making things nice, and it kind of lays into the placemaking and economic development and on and on and on. But anyway, that's a long way of me saying that's how I got my honorary AIA award.
Has receiving that honor had any effect on your perspective in being a leader to architects when you're not an architect yourself?
Not necessarily. I've always kind of approached whatever I'm doing, whether I'm playing a basketball game or working in the office, you're always just striving to be your best consistently. And so I don't really, that hasn't said, oh, well, now I need to do more. It really hasn't changed my perspective. I've always wanted to do the best for the people I'm working for and the people I'm serving. And so that has not, it hasn't changed me. How's that?
Sure.
Yeah, it hasn't changed me. I'm just grateful to have the award. Because like I said, there's very few non-architects that receive that designation. So
That's really
I'm
cool.
honored to have it.
Yeah, I would be too. Your participation in class 38 of the Stanley K. Lacey Executive Leadership Series suggests a commitment to community leadership development. How did that experience specifically transform your approach to leading AIA Indiana? And what community leadership principles have proven most valuable in advancing architectural excellence in Indiana?
That's a big question.
Well, handle it a part at a time.
Yeah. Basically, I was in SKL, Stanley K. Lacey Leadership class 38, best class ever, 38, great. And it was one of the best experiences I've ever had. To be grouped with other folks. I always felt like the dumbest person in the room because you had all these really heavy hitters, very thoughtful, very smart, very accomplished folks in my class with me that I'm like, wow, you had to kind of raise your game. It made me I thought my game was decent, but not compared to these folks. And so literally I felt like the dumbest person in the room almost every time. And so I learned a lot from them on, how to, asking good questions and being attentive and always striving for just a little bit more. I mean, it was like being in a room of overachievers, you really have to kind of snap to it and get to it. And just being around those folks, it just kind of the goodness and kind of rubbed off. And at the same time, you get to make really good friends that you probably have that I will have the rest of my life. So it was a very good experience, very bonding experience. And so how that has helped me, a couple things. One, definitely, connections that I can reach out to when there is an issue that I'm kind of scratching my head on with AA. There's a very, kind of eclectic group of folks in different fields that I can kind of tap into sometimes. Say, hey, I'm dealing with this issue. What do you think about this? I just want to pick your brain. So that was very helpful. Also, um, the whole public service, I've always been involved trying to give back publicly. Never enough, but I've always tried. So I was involved with Big Brothers, Big Sisters for a long time, and I still keep in contact. I've had 3 different little brothers, still keep in contact with them. Even though we're officially kind of out of the program, they're grown adults now.
Sure.
But that experience also kind of, I looked for my next kind of public service experience, and that led me to the Edna Martin Christian Center, where I was a member of the board, because again, one of my classmates in SKL was on the board, and they were looking for board members, and wanted to know if I'd be interested, and I said, definitely. And that's an organization that's over like around 25th and Keystone in that area that helps out, kind of Martindale, Brightwood neighborhood and kind of all assets, whether it's job training, food pantry, daycare, pre-K issues. They have their Senior Angels program for the senior citizens in the neighborhood. It's just kind of a wraparound service for a neighborhood that's kind of underserved and needs help. And so that was a tremendous experience for me. And doing those things, I often, with Big Brothers and being on the board of Ed and Martin Christian Center, I always feel like I'm getting more out of it than the people I'm serving, just because it really makes an impact on your mindset as far as, you know what, there's a lot of people out here really in tougher slot than I am, and it gives you a better perspective on life and how you should probably be grateful for more things than what you have, because there's a lot of people out there struggling and some pretty hard consequences. And so, like I say, I always felt like I got more out of it than what I was able to get. And I was trying to give everything, and I did, but it really helps one's perspective, to know that you need to be grateful more often. You should be grateful more often. Be thankful for what you have, because it can be tough out there.
Are there any specific community leadership principles that you have found valuable that you can identify?
You know, kind of first and foremost, and this sounds like a cop out answer, and like, like, you know, of course, but just getting involved, showing up, just being there goes so far. And there's so many people that just don't even show up. And if you just show up, man, that makes a big difference. And all sorts of good things happen when you were there. Nothing's going to happen, good or bad, if you don't show up per se. But if you do show up, a lot of times, a lot of good happens, just because you're physically and mentally in that space where you should be and probably need to be, if you're going to help somebody properly. And so that's probably the one thing, is like, just get involved and show up, and be consistent in doing those two things.
Very cool. Thank you for that. That's good advice. AIA Indiana is hosting a healthcare design symposium in August. What sparked this specialized focus on healthcare architecture, and how do you see the events of the recent years, including the pandemic, reshaping healthcare facility design in the Midwest?
Yeah, the healthcare design symposium kind of came about. I mean, with we as many folks know, there's quite a bit of significant healthcare design work going on in the city. Down at IU Health, the old Methodist Hospital. That's kind of hard to not see. It's the biggest healthcare project in the United States currently. So
It's usually the biggest project going on in Indianapolis.
yeah, I mean, it is massive. And so that, and all the folks in Indiana kind of working on that project, and I give a lot of credit to Jim Maladicki, AIA, who's with IU Health, and kind of for lack of a better term, the head honcho of that entire project. He's been very involved with AIA, and he and I met and said we should have a healthcare design committee, and I think that's a great idea. And the committee led to, hey, why don't we have a symposium to talk about these issues? And healthcare design, like you mentioned the pandemic earlier, I mean, that really kind of pushed our healthcare design folks to the forefront in talking about why healthcare design, again, why healthcare design spaces matter and are a little bit more specialized. And, everything that kind of goes into a the healthcare project. It's a lot different than, building a Burger King. I mean,
Sure.
it's just a lot different, and a lot of different, a lot of different a lot of other design considerations have to be considered. Um, and so because of that, and it is so specialized, AIA Indiana does a healthcare design, or a annual design awards program, AIA Indiana Design Awards program. And healthcare projects would be submitted, but they are so specialized that they rarely would get an award, just because they're so very specialized. And so with the AA Indiana Healthcare Design Symposium, after the first year, the second year we added healthcare design awards to that program, and to recognize, and kind of bring attention to the specialty of healthcare design architecture.
So you got its own category.
Exactly. So they have their own healthcare design awards program. Now they can still enter the AIA Indiana Design Awards program, because it's not impossible for them to win a general award. But again, their work is so specialized, that we felt it would be a good thing.
I can imagine it being difficult to compare apples and oranges.
Very, when you're comparing, a surgical center to beautiful home on a lake in northern Indiana.
How do you do that?
It's really hard. I mean, and we do get a jury, we always get a jury from outside the state to review our submissions. But for the design award, for AIA Indiana Design Awards kind of journal, you have a diverse jury made up of all different kind of folks. Some may be a residential specialist, some may be a education specialist, some may be just a generalist, but maybe you might not always get a healthcare specialist in that diverse group. Whereas with the Healthcare Design Awards, we have a healthcare specific experienced jury that is collected. So everybody in the jury does healthcare. So it's those are not easy awards to win because you have such a kind of high level jury of healthcare design experts literally from across the country, reviewing the work that is being done by Indiana AIA architects in the healthcare world. And so the folks who get these awards really earn them because, like I said, they have literally the best and the brightest healthcare designers looking at these submissions. So that's kind of how that is played out.
Out of my own curiosity, how do you find these judges? Are these AIA members in other states?
Mhm.
Do you just reach out to national and ask for
On that,
recommendations?
yeah, on for the healthcare one, we have, like I say, our healthcare design committee, and so they're pretty connected with
Okay.
other healthcare architects across the country. And so usually I'll lean on that committee to say, who could we have jury the healthcare design awards? And this year, for example, it's Bill Hercules, very well-respected healthcare architect, and he's going to not only be one of our keynote speakers, but he's also the jury chair. So I don't say we're killing two birds with one stone, but basically, we have Mr. Hercules coming in to not only present at our symposium, but also then to present the awards. And he's also already organized the jury. The call for submissions is out. Those are due next month. That jury room, and then he selected his jury from folks he has worked with from across the country. So in short, that's where that jury came from. Now for our kind of more general AIA Indiana Design Awards, I usually lean on one of my counterparts in another state to say, hey, can you organize a jury for me? And we usually try to find, a state that, not too close, because we want to make sure the jury is completely as unbiased as possible. And so I usually lean on one of my colleagues from another state AIA chapter to provide the jury. And so this year the jury is from AIA Oklahoma. And it just so happened that they asked me for Indiana, AIA Indiana, to provide them a design awards jury. So we just kind of like, I'll organize your jury, you organize my jury, and we all will come out winners in the end.
That's a great segue into my next question. Every other year, there's a joint AIA Kentucky and AIA Indiana convention, which demonstrates a regional collaborative approach, kind of what you're describing right now. What motivated this cross-state partnership, and how does this model of collaboration create opportunities that might not exist within state borders alone?
Yeah, we've always had a really good relationship with AIA Kentucky. I mean, that's probably the chapter that we are closest to, both in just communications and kind of how we operate. And a lot of times if I have an issue, I'll call my counterpart in Kentucky. Her name's Kelly Ives. I'll call Kelly and say, hey, I'm dealing with this. What do you think about this? She'll do the same thing with me. We're similar in size. And so there's just a comfort there. And our folks, both in the Hoosiers and the good friends from the Commonwealth of Kentucky, the architects, they seem to get along really well. They both have a passion for bourbon, it seems. That's another big one. But it's just a good mix of folks. And then on top of that, the other thing kind of, so the two groups work well together, number one. Number two, you have a lot of, potential sponsors, exhibitors that usually will oftentimes have Indiana and Kentucky in their territory. A lot of the folks that want to work with architects, they have regional sales folks. And a lot of times that region usually is Indiana, Kentucky is already in that region. Or you might get an Ohio in there mixed sometimes in the region, or Illinois or Michigan, what have you. But it's almost always Indiana and Kentucky are together. And so we're able to kind of offer exhibitors and sponsors, those who want to be in front of architects, a really good value for their time and their money to be spending with like top design architecture decision makers in this Indiana, Kentucky region in one place for 2 days. So it works out quite well for everyone. And just getting all those groups to, Indiana, Kentucky folks together, it's just a really good mix. And people enjoy the other folks, everybody kind of enjoys their company, the company that's there. And there's lots of good learning opportunities. A lot of our members in Indiana, Kentucky are facing some similar type issues a lot of times, just because of where we're physically located. And so it's just a really good synergy. Now, on the off years, and I'm not trying to downplay an Indiana convention, but when we do an Indiana convention, it's just we do one day as opposed to a 2-day convention when we partner with Kentucky. But that 1-day convention is much more Indiana focused. So there's some value in that, being able to kind of focus just on Indiana as opposed to, okay, we got to kind of think about the region. And so the 1-day convention that we do in Indiana just gives us a little bit more flexibility. It's just 1 day. Again, that's where we do our design awards, service awards, winning, winner announcements, continuing education, try to bring in a thoughtful speaker, kind of on the architectural design issues of the day. So the Indiana only convention, it's fun too and productive. It's just a little bit different, but we definitely look forward to partnering with our brethren from Kentucky.
Under your leadership, how has AIA Indiana's approach to continuing education and professional development evolved?
When I started, and a lot of this kind of was brought on by the pandemic, but when I started, like, everything was in person, seemingly all the time, other than maybe at conference calls here and there. But the pandemic really kind of pushed forward, um, you know, who was using Zoom before the pandemic or Microsoft Teams? Maybe a few people, but not many.
Sure.
And the pandemic just kind of pushed all that forward. So we have been able, during the pandemic, because we weren't able to physically meet on a regular basis, we were doing lots of what we termed and still have AIA Indiana CE webinars. And so these would be statewide, basically, and we opened it up to anybody, actually. I mean, you didn't have to be from Indiana, but you had to be an AA member. And our sponsors and exhibitors really liked that because they were trying to get and reach out to folks. So they would jump on these calls. We would reserve these CE webinars for our sponsors to present. So they could be the presenter. I mean, because a lot of them are out there already doing lunch and learns and things like that. And so this gave them an opportunity to reach out statewide to our folks during the pandemic, to talk about, their products and their services and how they can assist in the design process. And so that proved, and we were doing like one a week almost during the pandemic. I mean, we had a lot going on. So it's almost like we increased our continuing education availability just because folks weren't going into firms per se, and giving presentations, that we just kind of had webinars on Zoom that everybody could participate in. And so with that, we've kind of continued that model. We don't do them once a week anymore, but they're more like once a month. But it still provides, and they're still exclusive for our exhibitors, our members, and for our sponsors to be the ones who are able to present. We also have some members present sometimes too, on when they have some interesting new topics that they want to share. But for the most part, it's reserved for our current sponsors to present those, and those have been very well received. But at the same time, we're back meeting again, and so we have sections under the AIA Indiana chapter. So we have a Fort Wayne section, an AIA Northern Indiana section, AIA Indianapolis section, AIA Southern Indiana section. And so all those sections are also doing local programming for their local members to meet up. And so we have monthly kind of in-person programs in all those sections, as well as doing the AIA Indiana CE webinars roughly once a month, on top of every now and again we'll double dip in Indianapolis just because that's the biggest section as far as the number of members, where we'll have our own AIA Indianapolis Lunch and Learn. And again, that's reserved for our sponsors to present those. So it's almost like we've doubled the amount of programming, if not tripled the amount of programming we're doing now as opposed to before the pandemic. So I was like, that may be a good thing that came from the pandemic.
Yeah, I can imagine that's very much appreciated by some of the architects. Even though you have 3 separate sections in the state, I'm sure there's some people that still live far enough out that going to the in-person ones are.
Yeah, actually 4 sections. So northern, southern, Indianapolis, and Fort Wayne.
Gotcha.
Yes.
So even though you have the 4 sections, there's probably some that still live out far enough.
Oh,
Going in person is challenging.
exactly.
So I'm sure that's very much appreciated. Well, what innovative learning formats or content areas have you championed that may not be obvious to those outside of the organization?
I think the one thing we've, I think, done a pretty good job of is maintaining a very good variety of programming. And so not only a variety in terms of subject matter, but also variety in terms of ways you can participate in those learning sessions, whether it's and because we have our members are, a diverse group, sometimes the webinar is the only thing they can do. And that's fine. Sometimes they can only get out at lunchtime. And so those kind of lunch and learn programs is what they can do. In Indianapolis and some of the other sections, we do a monthly program where it's in the, 5 to 6 is networking and 6 to 7 is a program. Well, we have a lot of members who have kids in sports or music or theater or school projects, things like that, Cub Scouts, Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, that they can't, that's the time that they need to be with the kids, making sure they are getting to where they need to go. So they can't do that. But again, we have these other options available. So we're trying to make sure we are able to provide service to all our members, from, the young single person to the now person with, family responsibilities to the more seasoned design professionals who have a little bit more flexibility in their schedule to those who are retired, but yet still want to be involved and still want to have that camaraderie and still want to keep learning and still want to kind of know what's going on in the profession that they've dedicated their entire life to. So we're trying to touch all those folks on their terms.
Has that approach influenced any of the other Indiana AIA chapters that you've noticed?
Well, we run all the, it's just us. And so when I say,
Outside of Indiana.
outside of Indiana, maybe a little. I mean, every kind of state chapter, and then there's local chapters as well. Indiana's a bit unique, whereas we have one state chapter and then we have voluntary sections underneath. So there's only one legal entity within AIA in Indiana, whereas in, say, for example, Ohio, you have a Cincinnati chapter, you have a Toledo chapter, you have a Cleveland chapter, you have a Columbus chapter, you have a Youngstown. I mean, so you have all these individual chapters, plus on top of that, a state chapter. So, and that's one thing with AIA. When you become a member of AIA, you're automatically a member of your local, state, and national kind of divisions. And you can't pick and choose. You can't say, well, I just want to be a member of national and nothing else, or I just want to be a member of Indianapolis and nothing else. You're automatically all three. But one thing we've done in Indiana is we consolidated, and instead of having, 5 separate legal entities that need, insurance and tax filing and business entity reports, all those things, we just have do it one time. And then those local sections in Indianapolis, Fort Wayne, South Bend over to the region, Southern Indiana, Evansville, Lawrenceburg, but mostly Evansville, they are able to just focus on providing service to members and doing what they can to promote and the value of good design and why it's important to hire an architect. And so it's really worked out well for us. But each, like I said, each kind of the chapters, other local chapters, state chapters from they're all similar, but they all have a very unique personality, kind of like our member firms. They're all doing architecture, but they're all very different. They all have their unique personalities, quirks, traits.
Sure.
Kind of the same goes with, even though we're all kind of in the same profession, kind of doing the same things, we're all just a little bit different. Similar, but very different.
The AIA motto states that good design makes a difference. How do you personally measure and evaluate whether AIA Indiana's initiatives are truly making a difference in communities across the state?
That is a tough one to measure, and I think it's one of those, what I feel, almost unattainable goals. So we're always pushing that direction, but not every, and I'll brag on Columbus, Indiana. Not every community is Columbus, Indiana, that had a key leader in J. Irwin Miller, and who saw the value of good design and was able to make it a part of the fabric of that community. We're pretty blessed in Indiana to have that Columbus model
Sure, yeah.
within our state. And it's kind of funny when I'm out traveling across the country, whether it's a work event or pleasure, when I tell them, hey, I'm from Indiana, most people say, oh, Indianapolis. But if I'm talking to an architect who's not from Indiana,
SU Columbus.
that's Columbus is there. And it's always Columbus, never Indianapolis, Columbus, because that is what architects, I mean, it's kind of a mecca for most architects throughout the country, if not actually the world, because there's so much quality architecture in such a small space that it's somewhat I'm still, my mind is blown every time I go there. I'm just like, wow, there's so much here. And sometimes it sneaks up on you, and sometimes it hits you right in the face, but it is something else. And so with that, we're always kind of pushing, and you have, historic communities that are known for their historic architecture. For example, I just mentioned I was Madison, Indiana. I was born and raised in Madison, Indiana, historic downtown Madison. Essentially the entire downtown is on the National Register. It was one of the three first national Main Street programs. It was in Madison. So it is what I consider the Charleston, South Carolina, or the Savannah, Georgia of the Midwest. It has that level of historic architecture. And so we have a lot of positive, and then you have New Harmony down in the southwest part of the state. Again, another architecture kind of mecca that's world renowned. And so we are really blessed with very unique spaces that are well known throughout the country and the world for architecture. So we have a good place to start from, but we're wanting everybody to, all the local communities to get up to those levels. And those are high levels to attain. But that's always the goal. So it's hard. It's a hard goal, but it's a fun goal, and it's a worthy goal.
You have extensive government relations experience.
Mhm.
What has been your most challenging architectural advocacy issue in Indiana?
That is a really good question.
And while you're answering it, how did you navigate the competing interests to achieve a positive outcome for that for the built environment in that issue?
I'd say the current most challenging issue, and we aren't successful on it yet, we're still working at it, is to update Indiana's outdated building codes. It has been a tough road, especially in a state that is as red as Indiana, because building codes are essentially government regulations. And in a state like Indiana that's very red, very conservative, the immediate mindset is, well, if it's a government regulation, it's got to be bad. Can't be anything good. And so when you try to update these building codes, and it's kind of a vicious cycle, the longer you wait to get them updated, the more expensive things are going to be, because they're getting so outdated. For example, Indiana's current kind of electrical building code it's pre-iPhone. It doesn't recognize LED lighting. And so if Indiana wants to be, this cutting edge, state for business and data centers and things like that, yet our building, the electrical code for buildings in Indiana doesn't even recognize LED lighting. How serious are you? But it's government regulations. bad. So it's been tough to get that updated for all our building codes in Indiana. And again, the building codes, and not to get too deep in the woods, but there's International Code Council, and they have all these experts come together from whether it's housing and safety and firefighters and everything you can imagine involved in building and design, and they work on these updated codes. And so there's a new edition every few years, and Indiana just hasn't kept up. And what usually happens, we take that kind of model code and we kind of get a group of Indiana experts together, and this is done through the Indiana Department of Homeland Security. And within that, there's the Building Commission within the Department of Homeland Security. And so they're kind of charged with updating the code. So basically, they form groups of experts that look at these model codes and kind of put the Indiana version on, because building issues here are going to be different than in Florida or Texas or South Dakota or California. And so every state kind of has their kind of little quirks within the building code. It's all very similar, but there's little different. There's some differences depending on what state you're working in. And so that happens, and then it kind of goes through the executive branch rulemaking process. But there is a rule in place, a law in place actually, that any new regulation that has more than a $500,000 impact, they have to go back to the drawing board and try to get that under $500,000. So the longer you kind of wait,
more expensive,
the more it just gets harder and harder. And you definitely, we have groups who are opposed to aggressively updating the building. I think any update, they look at, it's like, well, that's too much. And we're like, well, that's the minimum. And so you kind of have those competing interests going as well. But that is one that we're still in the process of trying to get those updated.
How do you navigate those competing interests?
Very carefully. Always with respect. At least that's how I operate.
Sure.
One thing, as far as working in the State House and government relations, your word is it. I mean, if somebody perceives you as double crossing them or maybe not telling the whole story, you're kind of toast, and for good reason. And so being forthright, being as transparent as possible at all times, and being honest and direct is usually the best way to go. Now it's still not going to get you anything. But at least it doesn't push you farther back.
Sure. So having, what's the word I'm looking for? Having good intentions is very valuable when doing that, it sounds like, because if you're trying to be transparent, obviously your intentions have to be good all around.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's a tough one. It's a really tough one. Especially when you have, like, say, policymakers in place, because Indiana is so red that just automatically, without even knowing what it is, government regulation, bad. So you're started from behind the 8 ball already, trying to let them know, okay, this is actually a government regulation that we need, because it helps keep people safe, helps people be, keep them productive, and it also has an impact on placemaking and economic development, as opposed to putting up, cracker boxes that look like crap and fall apart in 5 years. You probably want something that's going to last and has the latest stuff in it.
So it sounds like it takes a lot of conversations to overcome that bias.
Yes.
Because you said, government relations bad, and then you have to like convince them that this particular one is good. Or, I mean, how do you do that?
Kind of, I mean, it's there's the business case to make for it, as well as the kind of the health and safety case to make for it. Especially now, with rising prices of energy, having buildings that are set at a higher standard, because you got to remember the building code, that's the minimum standard. That's the bare minimum. And Indiana's bare minimum's like back from 2012. I mean, that's kind of where we're at collectively in our building code level. So when you have others come from out of state and they're doing a project, they're like, what do you mean? There's all these things that aren't, so I don't want to say it's the Wild West, but there's a lot that is not required in Indiana that is required in other states, number one. Number two, a lot of folks like that because it's easier to build and it's cheaper, but cheaper is not necessarily better, number one. And then just because it's cheaper, a lot of times it's not necessarily, a lot of times you don't go after the cheapest thing every time. And
Price quality.
yeah, because you do sacrifice quality. And then this is getting into the weeds, because our building codes are so old. When projects need to do something that's a little bit more advanced than what is allowed in the building code, then they have to go before the building commission to get a variance to be allowed to do what is commonplace in most other states. So that actually is costing more and taking more time. Kind of the opposite of old government regulations are bad because they cost more and they take. Actually, because we haven't updated our building codes, it is costing more and taking more time, because if you want to do anything that's not, like I say, the code is the minimum, and if it's not addressed in the code, then you have to get a variance for it. So it's just kind of this kind of unnecessary circle of negativity.
That's too bad. I'll go ahead and change the subject because that sounds pretty frustrating.
It sucks.
Every region has its own architectural character. How would you describe Indiana's unique architectural identity? And how has AIA Indiana worked to both preserve and evolve this identity during your tenure specifically?
Yeah, as I mentioned earlier, we have a beautiful collection of historic architecture throughout the state. And the small towns that dot Indiana's kind of landscape. And you go to any of these small towns, almost all of them have like this really kind of unique looking downtown. Some are better than others, and some, and in the name of progress, a lot of times some of these beautiful buildings have been torn down to put up a parking lot or God knows what. So we've lost a few things, but the treasures that Indiana has architecturally are, if anything, one of, I don't want to say a secret, but sometimes, just take, for example, French Lick in West Baden, French Lick's, the hotel, the Dome in West Baden. You tell people about this and they're like, who aren't from here, and you're like, you got to be kidding me. That's in Indiana? I'm like, yeah, the largest freestanding dome in the world until the Astrodome was built was in Indiana, in in West Baden, French Lick. How amazing is that? All the big name architects that have done work in Columbus, Saarinen, IMP, the list goes on. Just like every kind of big known, well-known, recognized architect has done work in Columbus, Indiana. Very few other states have that kind of concentration of mid-century modern classics that are studied worldwide, right here in Indiana. And then, like I said, the historic architecture of places like Madison, Indiana, almost unmatched anywhere in the country. And yet we have all that here. And so one thing that we've done, continued to pursue at the General Assembly is, trying to get state historic preservation tax credits kind of more updated and use more. But that's always hard because we view all these, there's so many places in Indiana that just need that little bit of help with like say an historic project in a historic downtown. And a lot of times if you can just get that one project going, it's kind of the linchpin and kind of pushes the development of everything around it. You get that one project going, then all of a sudden other things start happening. And so that's kind of been our focus, is trying to, I hate to say lean into historic preservation quite a bit, but kind of, because especially in this day and age of economic development where I think now a lot of the economic development leaders are seeing that, placemaking is of equal, if not more, of equal importance, if not more important than sometimes the benefits package, the tax breaks and incentives and things like that you're giving somebody. If the leaders of that firm that may want to relocate don't like where they're, don't like any place where they're going to have to live, then
what good are the other benefits?
exactly. Exactly. So we're in a competition now of, who can have the best places to live in conjunction with, okay, you still probably need to provide some incentives, but sometimes, I remember being at a conference where the former mayor of Oklahoma City was talking about this, where they were trying to get a big, hub in, and they were competing against another city and state. And the mayor talked about how they thought they had everything lined up. They had the best, they literally had the best development package, tax incentives. From a dollar value, it beat everything there. But one thing that they weren't told, and how they were going to select the final place, was they sent like their top 10 executives and their families for a long weekend in each of the cities they were considering. And when the decision was finally made, Oklahoma City did not get that. And so the mayor asked, it's like, okay, we had the best package, so what led you, to go with another location? And they said, well, he told them the story. It's like, we didn't tell you, but we sent out our executives and their wives and the kids, the whole 9 yards, and to visit the final 3 places we were considering. And none of them really liked anything that was happening. There was nothing to do in their mind in Oklahoma. There was just nothing there at that time. And so we went with another location that the incentives were still good, not as good as yours, but the quality of life was going to be considerably better. And so that's what made that decision. So I think now those in the economic development game know that that is of equal importance, if not more important sometimes, than just the incentives you're giving. And that really plays into what AIA promotes. Promoting good, healthy, quality design, quality place, safe places. That's right in our wheelhouse.
When you were speaking earlier about the historic preservation being a large part of the architectural identity of Indiana, I was thinking to myself, how does that identity evolve? Is that the placemaking? Is placemaking how that, because you can maintain the historicity of the architecture while making a place around it. Is that the evolution of our identity here in Indiana?
I think that has to be a key, because we have so much. We have so many good things already there to offer. So I think you kind of start with that, and then you can kind of fill in around it. While at the same, it gets a little tricky sometimes, because in the name of development, somebody might want to put a brand new high rise or something in like an historic community, and you're like, well, wait a second, and then you go, it's like, well, that doesn't fit. It looks strange, and it's almost like you kill that golden goose that's been laying eggs. So there is a way to do development within historic, but it has to be, and this again kind of frustrates those that are like, hey, it's my property, I should be able to do whatever I want with it. Sure. And so it's like, okay, you can, but that might destroy everything that we've worked on for years, because you want what you want, and it may not fit in this space and not be in the proper context, and now it just looks ridiculous. And like I say, I always kind of point back to and they're not perfect by any stretch, but you kind of point back to Savannah, Georgia, or Charleston, South Carolina. It's like, do you see them building a Walmart down right in the middle of the historic district ever? No. So why would you ever consider that? But yet that happens sometimes here. I don't want to sit here and say the Walmart's in the store, but you have those issues that pop up sometimes, because it's, freedom is very important. And sometimes there's places in India that don't want to give up that kind of individual liberty. So there's that's kind of hands off. Whereas you have other communities that, like a Columbus, for example, that takes it very seriously and has been able to blend kind of developments while preserving kind of the gems that they have.
Looking beyond the planned events for 2025, what's your boldest vision for how AIA Indiana might evolve over the next decade?
Here's a good question.
Are there any experimental incentives or unconventional partnerships you're excited to explore?
One thing that we've worked on, and this is kind of my white whale goal, kind of the big white whale that I'm chasing, is to bring the AIA National Convention to not just Indianapolis, but Indianapolis-Columbus, and have those. It's an Indianapolis-Columbus National Convention of Architects in Indiana. And so we've been working with AIA National to at least get Indiana considered. Usually for the national annual AIA convention, they usually are going to go to bigger cities, which we understand. A lot of times they kind of go back and forth between the coasts, whether it's Philadelphia, DC, New York, Boston, or LA, San Francisco, San Diego. And if they're in the Midwest, it's Chicago. And that's seemingly about it. And so we feel it's time to actually be in the middle.
Sure. I mean, Indianapolis is becoming an event city.
Exactly. And so we definitely have the infrastructure here, the convention infrastructure to handle a convention of that size. But I think their big concern is, will anybody want to come? Again, will anybody want to come to Indianapolis? And what I have found, as soon as people get here, they're like, wow, I didn't know all this was, they're just amazed. They're like, well, I didn't know all this was here. I'm like, well, it is. And it's pretty cool. And with architects, as I said, we've always wanted to marry Indianapolis and Columbus together, because I think that would be, oh yeah, Columbus is that, we can do, and we would just have buses running nonstop back and forth between Indianapolis, which is not that tough a drive. So we would have folks go, Columbus would be a massive part of this convention and a significant draw. So that's kind of my big, massive goal. It'll be very hard to attain, but
What's your prediction? If it were to happen, what's your prediction for when?
oh gosh, not for another 15 years minimum. So I got a long way to go, and
Let's make it happen.
yeah, that's probably my big goal.
Awesome. I appreciate your time.
All right,
Thanks for being on my podcast.
no problem. And it's been a pleasure.